The Battle of York, April the 27th, 1813, 210 years ago today. Greetings, dear listeners. For today's video, I will be largely relying on the excellent maps and timelines for the Battle of York found in Richard Feltoe's book, The Pendulum of War, The Fight for Upper Canada, January to June 1813, part of his 6-volume series, Upper Canada Preserved, which I will review in a future video. Thanks, Richard. Other works consulted include Pierre Berton's The Flames of War and Alan Taylor's The Civil War of 1812. In early 1813, new U.S. Secretary of War John Armstrong envisioned a two-pronged attack against Canada, the objectives being the seizure of both Kingston and Niagara. However, news that Kingston had been heavily reinforced led the Americans to shift to a secondary target, York, capital of Upper Canada and today's Toronto. The invasion fleet assembled at Sackett's Harbor, New York, on April 20th and was ready to shove off 3 days later. But the weather turned decidedly stormy. Here's a quote from Feltoe. Quote, "Overruling the advice of his naval commanders, Dearborn ordered the heavily overburdened American fleet to set sail, only to encounter a severe storm that forced the ships to come about and run back to Sackett's Harbor for sheltering." End of quote. Some sheltering. For 2 days the troops are trapped below decks. And those are the lucky ones. The unlucky ones are on deck in the cold rain. Finally, the weather clears on the 25th, and they set sail, arriving off York on the 26th. They will invade on the 27th. In charge of the naval forces, Commodore Isaac Chauncey. In charge of the invasion force, Brigadier General Zebulon Pike. Zebulon Pike, a noted explorer. Pike's Peak is named after him. Overall commander, Major General Henry Dearborn. Their opponent, in command of British and Canadian forces, Major General Sir Roger Hale Sheaffe, Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada. For a detailed order of battle, please see the Wikipedia article on the Battle of York, link in description. In order to describe the battle in a concise manner, I'm adopting the timelines found in the Feltoe book, The Pendulum of War. April 27th, 1813, 5:30 to 8 a.m. The Americans arrive off York, but strong winds push them west, away from York Bay and towards the open waters off Humber Bay, beyond the range of the artillery at Fort York and of the detached batteries, Half Moon Battery and the Western Battery. General Sheaffe gathers his troops at Fort York, but, in Feltoe's words, quote, fails to establish any coordinated response to the American attack. End of quote. Instead, independent units are sent west in order to find and engage the Americans, many taking obscure woodland trails to avoid artillery fire from the enemy ships. Captain Jarvis's Incorporated Militia Artillery Detachment occupies the Western Battery. Canadian Embodied Militia units head north to secure the main road heading towards York, followed by the Glengarry Light Infantry, which will break away to march towards the sound of the guns. Militia under Captain Jarvis, not Jarvis, Jarvis, these are different troops, arrive at Fort York then also march west. American troops will land to the west of Fort Roulet, an old fort long abandoned by the French, and some 2 miles west of Fort York and 4 miles west of the town. Here they first encounter Ojibwe and Mississauga warriors, followed by grenadiers from the 8th or King's Regiment. Both sides will take casualties fighting in the woods that fringe the shore. Both Grenadier Captain Neil McNeil and Donald McLean, clerk of the Legislative Assembly, are killed in action, as are 2 grenadiers who drown in a large pond, known today as Grenadier Pond, in Toronto's High Park. As more Americans land, they overwhelm and scatter the defenders, who retreat towards the old French fort. Among the invaders are Major Forsyth's green-coated 1st Rifle Regiment, sharpshooters who like fighting in the woods. 8 to 9:30 a.m. The battle at Fort Roulet. American vessels continue landing troops, while others sail east, back towards York, firing at targets of opportunity. In order to halt the American advance on York, the British and Canadian units establish a line of defense in a clearing near the old French fort. When the Americans arrive, the fight is on. American ships on Lake Ontario target the defenders and fire into their flank, causing significant casualties. Overwhelmed, the British and Canadians are forced to make a fighting retreat back towards the Western Battery and Fort York. 9:30 to 11 a.m. The British and Canadians establish a new line of defense at the Western Battery. Fire from the defenders will halt the invaders' advance until an accidental explosion in the battery inflicts serious casualties and destroys the position. The British and Canadians will continue their retreat, with some units heading for Fort York, others to the town itself, while the Jarvis and Jarvie companies take shelter in the bed of the aptly named Garrison Creek, north of Fort York's Stone Magazine. As the troops are battling it out on land, the American fleet moves into York Harbor to bombard the town. 11:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Feltoe entitles this part of the battle as "The Magazine Explodes at Fort York." Believing they have won the day, American troops form up to the west of the fort to await Sheaffe's formal surrender. Unfortunately, while this is going on, General Sheaffe, determined to prevent the Americans from taking the fort's Stone Magazine, orders it blown up. The resultant blast will knock the assembled American troops off their feet, shattering eardrums, and is even felt by the ships out on Lake Ontario, 500 yards away. Falling debris, which includes masonry, timbers, rocks, and stones, inflict serious casualties, including Brigadier General Pike, his ribs crushed by a huge boulder. Some 250 are hurt as a result of the blast, but the nearby militia, protected by their sheltering creek bed, will suffer lesser effects. Pike's reported last words, quote, "Push on, my brave fellows, and revenge your general." Some believe a British counterattack at this point might have defeated the Americans. But Sheaffe, who doesn't know about the effects of the blast, by the way, but Sheaffe determines to save his regulars to fight another day and retreats towards Kingston. As he retreats, he burns the partially completed warship Sir Isaac Brock as well as warehouses full of supplies to keep them out of American hands. Personally, I think Sheaffe probably made the right decision. And just as an aside, I note that the Americans were really angry that the regulars got away. But Sheaffe's decision doesn't sit well with the people of York, in particular the Reverend John Strawn. The Reverend's idea of a good soldier was the dashing and aggressive Brock, not the cautious and colorless Sheaffe, whose actions are more in line with those of his conservative boss, Sir George Prevost. In the end, however, the chorus of complaints by Strawn and others will lead to Sheaffe's replacement by Major General Baron Francis de Rottenburg. The Americans will occupy York until May the 2nd, during which time they famously burned the Upper Canada Parliament building, supposedly after some sailors allegedly find a human, and presumably American scalp, on display by the Speaker's chair. The invaders empty military and private warehouses and engage in widespread looting, assisted by some pro-American locals. When they eventually do leave, they take as a prize the vessel Duke of Gloucester, whilst burning the unseaworthy General Hunter. The Americans have won a moral-boosting victory, but at a serious cost, especially the death of Brigadier General Pike. But it is a victory they failed to build upon. They don't keep York and will next attack Fort George in the Niagara region. In addition, the burning of the Upper Canada Parliament sets a dangerous precedent and will ultimately lead to the burning of the White House in 1814. According to Wikipedia, the casualties are as follows: British/Canadian, 82 killed, 112 wounded, including 69 wounded prisoners, 274 captured, 7 missing. American, 55 killed, 265 wounded. As noted earlier, Richard Feltoe's The Pendulum of War also provides some excellent battlefield maps showing the action as it unfolds. I lived in Toronto for 3 years during the 1980s, and while I know vaguely where Fort York is, I think it would be great fun to tool around Toronto with Feltoe's maps, if you can stand the traffic, and see what the area looks like today. Believe it or not, most of the area was covered by forest in 1813. If anyone listening to this video tries exploring any of the locations involved in the Battle of York, please take some photos and videos and send them to me at wsjxxx@gmail.com. That's wsjxxx@gmail.com. Just be sure to put Battle of York in the subject line so I know it's not spam. If this is your first visit to 1812 channel, my name is Warren and I'm your host. I'm not a historian, nor am I an expert on the War of 1812. Instead, I'm a student wishing to learn about the conflict. Each month for the roughly 3 years of the war, I will outline the major events. I will also review a book on the war. Did I miss anything? Any errors? Then let me know in the comments below. When the barrage lifts, cheers! Pictures used in today's video, courtesy of Pix here, that's PX here, and they show various early military scenes, plus images of Toronto. The music today was called Prelude and Action by that patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod. My thanks again to Richard Feltoe, and my thanks to you for listening.